Remember your name. Remember your name. When I was a kid, every time I left the house, it didn't matter whether I was going to soccer practice or to band practice. It didn't matter whether I was going to hang out with friends or to spend some time in the library. My parents, before I would leave, they'd say, "Binta, remember your name. Remember your name." They continued to remind me to remember my name throughout college and throughout law school. Anytime that I was speaking to them, typically the night before a big exam or a big paper was due, my parents would remind me, "Binta, remember your name." When I was a kid, I hadn't the faintest idea what they meant by this. My name is Binta. That is not an easy name to forget. So what were my parents trying to tell me? As I got older, I started to begin to understand more and more that it wasn't just the superficial memory of my first name and my last name my parents were going after. What they wanted was for me to remember in all of my endeavors, in all of my pursuits, who I am, what I'm capable of, why I'm here. They wanted me to remember the totality of my experiences, the forces in life that have shaped me, the forces in life that have shaped my family. They wanted me to remember my faith and what my faith calls me to be. Anytime I have forgotten, anytime I've made a departure from who I am, I have failed, sometimes embarrassingly so. If I had just listened to my parents, that encomium, that wise advice, if I had chosen to remember, some of these failures could have been avoided. I'm convinced that every single person who's here, every single institution, every single business, every single individual, every single leader who's had success in life has done so because they've held on stalwartly to who they are. They've been reminded constantly of who they are in the same way that I've experienced my own failures when I've forgotten myself. Their successes have been jeopardized by a departure. So who I am. Who I am, what I value, the forces that have shaped me, led me directly into my career as a lawyer, into my career actually as a corporate lawyer. I grew up in Virginia, just outside of the nation's capital. I would submit to you that Virginia is still a southern state. And being so close to Washington, I was constantly exposed to legislators and rulemakers, lawmakers, all manner of people who were public servants. And in those days, these were people who came to Washington with the intention of serving. They were not interested in mere economic or political power, but they wanted to serve. But I was also profoundly shaped and deeply moved by the legacy of the civil rights movement. My family was one of the first, if not the first, to integrate the neighborhood I grew up in. Actually, both of the neighborhoods I grew up in. Just 15, maybe 20 years prior, it wouldn't have been possible. It wouldn't have been possible for my family to have lived where we lived, for us to have eaten where we ate, for us to learn where we learned, to pray where we prayed. And I knew that in order for us to get this far as a society, for all of these extraordinary changes to have occurred, that the law played a role, and that lawyers played a role, many of whom were in private practice, many of whom were people who were jeopardizing their livelihoods, their reputations, well, in some cases, their lives, so that people like me and actually every single person in this room could be who they were meant to be, could participate fully in the society, could participate fully in our economy. And so I saw a great beauty in the law, that it was dynamic and vibrant, that it was a source of progress, and that lawyers were important to the advancement of our society and the advancement to the rule for the rule of law. I saw that the law would be a tool for me potentially, that I could use it to breathe life into society, that there were problems that still needed to be addressed that hadn't been addressed. So fast forward into my career a little bit. wondering what a corporate lawyer can do to change the world and why it matters that lawyers exist. I'm sitting in my office. I'm negotiating a $1.5 billion asset sale, and my phone rings. I'm thinking that it's maybe the general counsel or the associate general counsel complaining that we haven't gotten a document out, that maybe it's one of my clients or one of my fellow colleagues, a partner, I was an associate at the time, calling and saying, hey, Binta, what's going on? You know, you're slow. Get it together. And I'm a little stressed. The person on the other side of the phone turns out to be the father of a friend of mine. He goes, Binta, I need your help. I'm like, you need my help? I'm a lawyer. I bill a lot by the hour. What are you talking about? There's nothing really that I can do to help you. He goes, I got to tell you this story. I have a feeling that you might be able to help. And so I listen. And he proceeds to tell me a story about a group of National Guardsmen from upstate New York who are serving in Iraq, and how one day when they were on patrol, this man, an Iraqi man, came running up to him, holding in his hands a child. And the child had no color, had no life practically in his body. This man was the child's father, and he was crying, he was weeping. He came up to these US servicemen saying, please, please help my son. I don't know what's wrong with him. I think he's going to die. So the guys called over a medic. The medic took a look at him, and he said, your son is going to die. I think that your son is suffering from congestive heart failure. And so then the question began, how do we get a poor Iraqi kid into the United States so that we can save his life? We're in war. Our country is suspicious. It's not going to be easy to get a visa for these guys to come over. So how do we get them into the United States? And my friend called me and he said, what can you do? And I said, well, you do realize that I'm a corporate lawyer. I do deals. I bill by the hour. I don't know how I can help you. And he said, Binta, I have a feeling that you know some people. And I said, well, you know, I might know a person or two. And so I got on the phone and I started going through my book, thinking about anybody and everybody who could call. I called a couple of senators in the state of New York, one of whom is now our Secretary of State. And I said, is there anything that you can do to help me help these people? For that, I got an award. I got an award by the Iraqi Army and the US Army. But I would submit to you that the real heroes here were not me, but the men in Iraq, the servicemen, the guardsmen, and the father, who had the courage, first of all, notwithstanding their differences, to speak to one another, and then secondly, to figure out a way how to get that kid into the United States in under 2 weeks so that he could live. That kid was 8. He's a lot older now. He's a teenager. He lives in, oh, I can't actually say where he lives. I can't even say his name. But he's living, and he played soccer just like I got to play soccer. Things are going great for him. Fast forward a few more years. I'm sitting in my office, and I see pop up on my screen that there's a woman who needs help. This woman, I'm going to call her Ella because to protect her identity. And this is not a client confidentiality thing at all. This is really truly to protect her identity. So Ella's in my office. I'm asking her what's going on, and she tells me her story. She's from a village in West Africa, a tribal village that's relatively remote. Growing up, she's horribly abused by her father. Her father forces her to marry a man who then brings her into the United States, and then he proceeds to abuse her. He rapes her repeatedly. He isolates her, not even social isolation, complete isolation in an apartment. He beats her so badly that there are several times she comes very close to dying. She's not allowed to go out of her apartment. She's not allowed to work. She's not allowed to experience any form of dignity, any form of humanity, any form of self-respect. This man had broken her down completely. And it was my job to figure out a way to help her to stay in the United States. And the reason why it became my job to do that was because when I asked her, I don't understand, why don't you just go back to your family in your West African village? She said to me, Binta, if I go back, it won't be my husband who kills me. It'll be my father or my brothers. And so she was caught quite literally between a rock and a hard place. And I had to do something to help. Corporate lawyers can help with this extraordinary project of creating positive change in the world. We have a role to play. We should be working with all of you. There is absolutely no conflict between the zealous advocacy of my clients' business interests and promoting the public service. We live in a country that is predicated upon the rule of law. And if people like me decide, I'm just going to focus on the deal, I'm just going to focus on helping to create value in the economy, sometimes for people who already have a lot of value, then we're undermining the rule of law and we're not advancing civilization. I'm very, very concerned that my profession has lost its sense of itself. I'm concerned that we have misprioritized. And so my big idea this afternoon is not even really that much of a big idea, and it's not a new idea either. I think that the legal profession needs to do as my parents were reminding me to do as a kid, that we need to remember who we are and why we're doing what we're doing. That we need to remember that we're a service that is about, that we're a profession that is about service, that is about putting others first. That we too need to be willing to literally lay our lives down for our friends. That we need to be willing to die to self. And I have a handful of suggestions, including increasing, doubling, or tripling the number of pro bono hours lawyers do serve each year, making it a requirement as opposed to a recommendation in order for a lawyer to continue to practice law, to maintain their license to practice law. I would like to see more lawyers commenting and participating in public affairs, educating legislators, but also the public as to the work that people are doing, the rules that are being made so that we can come up with better laws and better rules, rules that protect society on the one hand, but still allow for the development, that still allow for economic prosperity. Because the law is a technology. The law is a technology that enabled the Renaissance and enabled capitalism, ushered in the era of capitalism. It's a technology that forms the foundation of the United States. The law is a technology that made it possible for someone like me to be standing here before all of you today speaking with you, breaking the shackles of Jim Crow, allowing for every single person in this country to feel their humanity, to feel their dignity, things that people still all over the world are not yet able to feel. We have a real obligation if we're interested genuinely and truly in advancing society and advancing and changing the world. And I believe that we can do it. We've got to remember that we are not, I have a clicker, I was supposed to click some stuff. Looks like I'm a little behind. We are not sellers of a product. We are providers of a service. We are providers of a service that is desperately needed for us to continue to move forward. And so my big idea is that corporate lawyers stop thinking that there's not something they can do, because in fact, there is. In the same way that the legal profession has lost its sense of self just a little bit, that we've become detached from our higher purpose, that we've forgotten who we are, I'm worried that much of society has forgotten who and what it is, what our purpose is, that there are not enough of us who are willing to lay down our lives for our friends, that there are not enough of us who are willing to die to self, that we don't appreciate the power that we have within, and that we can solve problems, that we don't have to succumb to obstacles. And so my great hope this afternoon is that we can all begin to reflect a little bit on who we are, and where we've come from, why we're here, and what we're doing, so that once again, the legal profession, all parts of society, our nation, so that once again we can be on the path to glory. Thank you very much.